All right, let's talk about how to protect your backups from ransomware. So, ransomware is not a new topic, right? We've seen it in the news. All of you have talked about it at one point or another. So it is a common threat. We all know that it's not just a common threat for big companies, but for MSPs and SMBs, like smaller companies as well. What is becoming more interesting as AI is becoming bigger and bigger is that ransomware is becoming more creative in how it wants to attack your systems or your customer systems. And it's not only looking at your files or your server, it's now also specifically looking for backup files or the backup storage itself. So ransomware continues to be a threat for any business, really, because no one wants to deal with the downtime of a ransomware attack. But in particular, now also for the backups themselves, because the backups are your last resort at the end of the day, right? Like the backup is what gets you back up and running, no pun intended, um, if a ransomware attack hits you. So if the backup damages, excuse me, if the ransomware damages your backup, that's obviously a problem. So we wanted to talk through 5 principles that you can weave into your backup strategy that help you reduce the risk of ransomware damaging the backups of your own backups or the backups of your customers. Um, and we will not only just talk about like the principles, but also show you where and how NovaBACKUP can help you get those set up. And we start with a pretty straightforward one, multiple copies of your data. We've all heard of the 3-2-1 backup rule, I assume, which essentially says, right, that you have multiple copies of your data. Obviously, your primary data is one of those instances that you have. That's, your working data, all that kind of stuff, all good. In addition to that, you should have at least 2 more copies of your data, one somewhere local and another somehow offsite. And the reason for both of those really is you want to have the local copy for the quick restore if something happened and you need quick access to the lost file or to a lost system. The local copy gives you the speed. The offsite copy gives you the additional security if something happens with the local copy. Think a fire, right? Or think a theft, someone broke into the office and stole everything, then you always have something somewhere else that you can use to then get your data back. Nate, can you talk a little bit about how you can set up something like that with NovaBACKUP?
Yeah, I mean, a while ago we introduced the concept of the hybrid backup option within the software. Right now this will go to whatever local device you're going to, whether it be USB or NAS, local disk, what have you. And then the hybrid portion of it will actually go to the cloud too. One of the things that we get questions on in support is basically how does this actually work? Does it actually do 2 backups? Is it like at the same time, or kind of how that works? And how this works is it does the local backup first. Say it's going to a NAS, it does the backup to the NAS, and then immediately after that, back to the NAS is done, it'll actually mount that backup and send the new and changed files that the cloud does not have to the cloud. So it doesn't have to back up those files from the local machine again. It it actually grabs it from the backup. So this is also, in a way, kind of saying, hey, is my backup that I just did good? Because we're mounting that and backing that up to the cloud. So it kind of indirectly does a test. Was my backup actually good, and can I restore from it? Because it's actually doing the mount and grabbing the data directly from it. So that's a good thing, and you only need one backup job to do all of this. So that's kind of where we why we put this in, and it makes it quite simple on that.
What would you say is like a typical, or what's your recommendation on a typical setting for local versus cloud backups when it comes to retentions?
It really kind of depends on what you're doing, how much data is changing, and how much you how much cloud space you want to use, and how much local space you have. The defaults that we have out of the box is keep it at 30 days locally and then 60 days in the cloud. But we see a lot of different things. The minimum I'd really kind of tell people to do is keep minimum of like 2 weeks on the local and then 30 days in the cloud. That is the minimum I'd really try to recommend, assuming you have enough storage space, etc. But the 30/60 is a good rule of thumb, good default is kind of what we did.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, the next principle is about how we get those backups to the storage and the different mythologies of, how you can send over your backup. So everybody who has done a backup at least once has heard of something like incremental, like full and incremental backup and full and differential backup. Those are backup methods that have been around since backup software has been around, I guess, and they have a good place. The problem is with, especially like in the last years, right? We produce more and more data. Everything is stored in some way digitally or not. If we need it or not, it doesn't matter. But our systems, the stuff that we use just keeps growing, which then means our backup storage keeps growing, right? Because we're backing this up all the time to make sure we have another copy or two of all of that. And that's where a full and differential or a full and incremental backup methodology just is falling short nowadays. That's where something like, it's called incremental forever. It's an unfortunate name because it doesn't, it gives the feeling that it is just incremental, but it is so much more. But that's where an incremental forever backup comes into play, because it combines the advantages of a traditional incremental and a differential backup into a new backup methodology. We have a blog post and a video that goes into real detail on how incremental forever differs from a traditional incremental and a differential backup and how exactly it works. But Nate, maybe you can give us like a high level overview of why this is a great backup strategy for today.
I think the biggest thing is when we talk about retention. Retention is, we need to keep things longer. We need to, you know, more things are changing, and it just takes more space. And having an incremental forever type of situation for your backup allows you to do like, hey, I want to keep like the last 30 days worth of changes on my local backup situation, local backup device. Whereas if you do like a traditional full and incremental, you would have to, keep that full, do all the incrementals, and when you need to recover, you need to recover from all of them. And then at the end of that, you need to create another full. Whereas with the incremental forever, you can say, I want to keep the last 30 days, and things that are falling off of that are actually going to get removed from the backups as it needs to be. You don't need to do another full backup for that to happen. So it gives you a much shorter backup time frame for that, and honestly allows you to keep more storage or more versions of files longer in a typical situation. Let's put it that way. There's going to be the odds and ends that don't that don't make sense for keeping longer, and you just want to keep the same. But in general, it saves quite a bit of space locally. It still does give you the option that if you want to do um, another backup set, like a yearly backup set, you can do your typical grandfather, father, son in an incremental forever type backup if you really, really want to, but it's not nothing that you need to do anymore. Let's put it that way.
Great. All right, our next principle is about immutability. That is also something that probably a lot of you have heard, typically referring to cloud storage, immutable cloud storage, which then refers to a cloud storage that for a certain amount of time cannot be changed, nothing can be deleted from it, nothing can be changed on it, that kind of stuff. But there is another level to immutability when it comes to the backups themselves. Again, Nate, can you explain what that means and what that entails?
Yeah, so uh, immutable backups is a weird word, and you'll see a bunch of different definitions of what immutability means. But basically, what we're focusing on here is whatever you have selected for backup is going to be what is restorable. Even with this incremental forever, some of the people that have been around the block for a long time don't trust incrementals because of some of the bad things that have happened in the past with incrementals from various things like they're missing chains or other things. And what we did with our software and how we devised the integrity of the backups is that at the very beginning of every backup, it does this ensuring backup integrity. What this does is it goes out to the storage that you're backing up to, whether it's cloud or local, what have you, and it says, okay, what backup files are there? Okay. And then are my local indexes, do I have indexes for each of the backups that are out there? If not, I'm going to try to create the index, automatically import the index from backups that are not there already. And if there's missing backups that I have indexes on, I'm going to remove that index locally and then actually do an integrity check of, okay, did that index, did that backup have things that are required for future restores that are within the retention period? I know this is really complicated when I'm trying to go through it on just talking about it, but what it basically means is if some random person goes out and like starts randomly deleting backup files in your actual backup, the software is smart enough to say, "Hey, I'm missing these backup files," and that had like this Excel document and blah 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 in these particular backup files. I need to back those up in full, those particular files in full, to make sure that what is selected and in the retention period is restorable. So we're constantly checking, okay, everything that is selected, is that restorable, and can we make sure that we that the backup integrity is good. That is the basics of this. That we can go really deep on this, and it was an interesting thing to put together in the software. Let's put it that way. But there's a lot actually there in that backup integrity that is taking that's happening at the very beginning of the backup.
Right. And the next principle is also an important one. Similarly important to backup integrity checks is also the storage itself, that you keep that separated from the production environment. This is probably one of the most important aspects, actually, in your backup strategy, to keep your backups protected from ransomware. And that is for both local and offsite storages. So that means never map your backup devices as a network drive. So never make it available completely in your network so everybody can access that. And again, this is not just for a NAS drive or a USB attached USB disk or something, but also for your cloud storage. Keep that separated for backup purposes only. Don't put your production data on the same cloud storage, on the same cloud account that you have your backups on. And then on top of that, it's important to create dedicated backup users for those storages that only then the backup software essentially has access to the backup device. And then NovaBACKUP adds one more layer of security on top of that to ensure that those credentials essentially cannot be accessed. So again, Nate, if you can explain what NovaBACKUP does here.
Yes, and I'll give a little bit of a horror story that we just had. I think it was a week or two ago. Um, a person called into support, and they're like, "Hey, someone just got ransomware. I have backups, and can you help me restore? No big deal. We do this all the day, all the time. We get in, and the NAS that they've been doing backups to was mapped to the local machine and actually an open share also. So it was a guest share, and they hadn't stopped like turned off the machines that had the ransomware. So the ransomware was encrypting the data uh, on the NAS as we were seeing it. So we were like, okay, first off, shut down all the machines right now and let's copy anything we can off of that NAS to, in this case, a USB drive that from a known machine that doesn't have ransomware. Um, And this is a good example of if they would have had this lockdown, so the share, only being accessed via NovaBACKUP, no local credentials for that share, not joined to Active Directory, not available for any of the other machines on the network. They would have been in a much better place. Let's put it that way. Um, we're seeing more and more people, with everything going to cloud and less local servers. They're trying to use the NAS devices that they're also backing up to as like a file share or other things. And what we're trying to hopefully instill is that backup device that you're using, that's your lifeline, that's your insurance for all this data that you're backing up. Make it so that's the only thing this is doing. Make it so it's the only, it's just a backup device. Don't try to do multiple things on it. Don't, have multiple entry points into the NAS. Make it so that that NAS device, if you're using a NAS device, is secure and locked down. So, ransomware and other bad actors, whether that not they get in through various RDP or other things, that they can't get to it very easily at all. It's just one more, block for them to have to get around in order to get to that data to mess with it. So that's what we really recommend with Nova Backup. And all the credentials are, held locally. It's encrypted in the configuration. And if there's no local user that is associated with that NAS, we see it be more secure than what we're seeing in some setups. Let's put it that way.
And similarly, I know you briefly touched on it, but I wanted to call it out with offsite storage, cloud storage in particular too, because we see it,
Hmm.
especially with smaller businesses that think like, hey, I can have my OneDrive as an
Yes.
example. And then I just use all of that for, my share, my file share and whatnot, but then I just throw the backup file on there as well. Can you talk about that for a second as well?
Yeah, I mean, OneDrive's a great example because a lot of it, like a terabyte of OneDrive storage comes, quote unquote, for free with your Office 365 machine or license in a lot of cases. OneDrive's great. It's one of those things where it can keep things synced and that works, and you can have versioning on it. The problem does become is it's a sync, so it's not a backup. So yeah, you can have versioning there, but if, say that's a 30, 60-day version on there, sometimes you might not be able to revert to that version that you need to on that OneDrive thing. That's why we really recommend having, using that offsite storage, using a dedicated cloud storage that isn't in your normal workflow. So that's the only thing that's dedicated to. But I think that's the big thing that we see there.
Thank you. Thank you. And then the last principle that we wanted to talk about is testing the restore. This is something that we have to make t-shirts at one point for that. It is so crucial. Yes, Nate just talked about the built-in verification right at the beginning of every backup job. We are checking if the backup file is okay, if something was deleted, and if so, we send it again. That is great. But in addition to automated verification, right, errors happen. Things just happen. Sometimes a software doesn't do what it's supposed to do. I don't think that is a surprise for any of us. Um, Manual restores are also important to do alongside anything automated that the software is doing. That doesn't have to be on a daily basis, of course, right? That can be quarterly, as an example, but as long as it's done regularly, you just have another check with your own eyes, essentially, that makes sure that the backup is restorable if something happens. In addition to the built-in verification aid that you already talked about a little bit, there's also kind of a manual way to check if a backup file has everything in it. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the restores like like Josephine said. But we did implement a new function that we're adding some more features to, and um, improving it as we get more feedback on it. And that's the mount feature. The mount feature actually will mount the backup as a I'll call it virtual network share. It basically has a folder on your machine, so you can actually drill down into that backup itself, actually open files. It'll show as a folder. You can actually go into it. You can see the files in there. You can open them. You can copy it from it, and that'll also confirm that, hey, this backup is readable. The files that I need are there, and it's quite nice when I'll use the name Susie from accounting. Josephine says I always say Susie from accounting, but it's from when Susie from accounting says, "Hey, I'm trying to find this Excel document. It was in this folder, and now it's not." And inevitably, it's not. It was never in that folder. It was a different folder, and you as a technician has to find wherever that folder was, and being able to mount that as a folder and just use normal Windows search, or other searching utilities from within a folder is quite nice. So that's another thing on that portion of it.
Poor Susie.
I know.
All right, so we went at a rather high level about this topic. Obviously, in a webinar, there's restricted time that we have to talk about those things. But we prepared a white paper for you or an ebook for you that goes a little bit into more detail into these 5 principles, and also has additional links to further materials. And then if you have any questions at any given time, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to give us a call, send us an email, schedule a meeting. I'm always happy to talk with you guys and answer any questions that you might have. Thank you so much for joining, and thanks, Nate, for sharing all of your knowledge with us.
Not a problem.